Okay, now we're going to go over math because that is the worst part of this test, in my opinion. So, we're going to just go over just like, pretty big concepts that you have to be familiar with. And if you're not familiar with them, I'm praying for you because there are only 12 hours left. So, yeah. Anyways, first is pretty easy. It's just like, algebra and, equations, inequalities, functions, and graphs, right? You need to be very familiar with y equals mx plus b. A lot of the questions aren't going to have this x or like b for you to like realize, but it might be like 2y plus 3x equals 4, right? You're just going to have to know how to move this equation around so that it's, like y on one side and x and b on the other side, mx plus b on the other side. So, you divide that by 2, divide that by 2, divide that by 2, and you're going to get y equals negative 3 over 2x plus 2, right? So you need to know how to do stuff like that because most of the time they will not give you the y equals mx plus b. Sometimes they do, and that's great, but most of the time they won't do that. So you have to know how to shift the equation around. And you also have to know another thing, and that is perpendicular and parallel lines. So basically how this works is like, if you have your y equals mx plus b, and say, for example, it's y equals, 2x plus 3, right? They might give you this equation and be like, find an equation that is perpendicular to this. And you need to know that for perpendicular lines, it would be y equals the negative reciprocal of this, which is negative 1 over 2, because you just flip that over, plus 3, or whatever. This can be any number, but you know that this line is perpendicular to that line because it's the negative reciprocal of that. And if you want a line that's parallel, it has to have the same slope. So perpendicular is going to have the negative reciprocal, and parallel is going to have the same slope. And then another thing you do have to know is, again, just kind of have to shift equations. So if they give you, for example, density equals mass over volume, right? They might ask you to solve for it in terms of mass. And the way you do this is you're just going to, multiply this by this and multiply that by that, and it's just dv. So m equals dv. They're going to do this, but like a little harder, and basically just ask you to shift the equation around, and you need to know how to do that. Make sure you're not subtracting v from d, or, multiplying m by d, or whatever, just make sure you're doing it right. And there's also, you need to know x-intercepts and y-intercepts, right? If you have, let's say, 2x plus 3y equals 6, right? And they ask you to find the x-intercept. The x-intercept, right, is what you do when you cover y. So what you do is you cover y, which is 3y in this case, and you're going to say 2x equals 6. The x-intercept in this case is going to be 3, right? You do the same when you're trying to find the y-intercept. You cover your 2x, and it's going to be 3y equals 6, so your y-intercept is 2. Okay, that's a simple way to do it. The actual reason that it's like that is because when you find your x-intercept, y equals 0. When you find your y-intercept, x equals 0. But you don't really need to do that. You can just cover the entire thing with your hand or whatever you want, or just cross it out. Other than that, a lot of something else that has something to do with algebra is just knowing how to do exponential equations. So exponential equations are weird because they basically, it might be, a certain amount you have in your account, and there's like interest on it, or, it increases by 22% every year, right? So how you do this is you'll say, for example, if you had $585 in your account, you're going to have to multiply it by 1 plus, and if you're increasing by 22%, 0.22. And then this x can be x, it can be t, it can be m, whatever the, variable is, but that is going to be how many years, right? So your initial amount in your account times 1.22 to the power of x, which is your, years, is how you do that. They're going to kind of set that up. They're going to basically ask you, like, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does that mean, right? And if your account is well, this wouldn't really happen in real life, but, if something was decreasing by 0.22%, it would just be minus 0.22, right? And it would just be the same thing. So that's how you do exponential equations. And if they do ask you, like, for the graph of an exponential equation, and they give you, let's say, like, 2 to the power of x plus 3, right? An easy way to graph this, or because they might ask you what the graph looks like, an easy way to graph this is basically make x 0, right? Because if you make x 0, right, this is going to equal 1, because anything to the power of 0 is 1. 1 plus 3. So that's how you know your y-intercept is 4, because 1 plus 3 is 4, right? And so you're going to look for something that's touching 4, right? And you can probably eliminate most of the answers at this point, because some of them won't be touching 4, and that's just an easy way to do that. Another thing that you're going to need to know how to do algebra-wise is probably factor. Factoring is a big deal because you're probably gonna have to know how to do that. I guess in the calculator section, it's not that important to factor, but in the non-calculator section, you're gonna need to know how to factor. So for example, if you have like x squared plus, we can do 8x plus 16, right? What you're gonna do first is you're gonna multiply your a and your c, which is 1 and 16, and that equals 16. You're going to get your b, which is 8. And now you're going to try to find two numbers that multiply to 16 and add to 8. And that's pretty easy, 4 and 4. So you're going to rewrite your equation, and it's going to be x squared plus 4x plus 16. So it's basically what we had before, but we just kind of like separated it. So now that we have 4 terms, it's easier to factor. So for the first 2 terms, you can factor out x. That's pretty easy. X, and then you put little parentheses, and then x, because x times x is x squared. And then x times what equals 4x? 4. So you just make that plus 4. And then this is plus, and then here, you can factor out 4 over here, and then in parentheses, x plus 4 again. Because, 4 times x is 4x, and 4 times 4 is 16, right? So, and that's how you're going to solve that. So x plus 4, you're going to take one of the parentheses, it doesn't matter which one, equals 0. And x plus 4 equals 0. So in this case, actually, your 2 zeros are negative 4. So your answers are x equals negative 4 and x equals negative 4. But, if you solve it for other things, like, they will be different numbers. But in this case, it was the same number. You're also going to need to know how to do something, which is going to make it easier. I guess you could factor to do this, but they're going to ask for sum of roots. Sum of roots is basically like if you added all your solutions and summed them up. They might ask you what sum of roots is. They might ask you what the sum of the solutions is. Whenever they say sum of the zeros, sum of the roots, sum of the solutions, you have to do this, right? If you have x squared plus bx plus c, your sum of roots is going to be negative b over a. It is always negative b over a. This never changes. It is always going to be negative b over a. You can find the sum of roots by factoring and getting the solutions, but that is very time consuming. So try to memorize this. If they ask you for sum of roots, you need negative b over a. Now we can go over, I guess you could do system of equations too, because system of equations comes up a lot on the SAT. So for example, if they give you, 3x plus 2y equals 12, and let's say 1.5x plus 3y equals 14, right? The way you would solve this is actually, you can take this entire equation and multiply it by 2, or negative 2 actually, right? And it sounds like weird because you're like, why are you doing that? But when you multiply this entire thing by negative 2, this becomes negative 3x, right? Minus 6y equals 28. Or 26, sorry. Or, my bad. Negative 28. Anyways, so when you do that, right, you can cross this out. 3x minus 3x, these cancel each other out. 2y minus 6y is negative 4y, and that equals what? 12 minus 28, which is, I don't know, like negative 16, right? And if you divide this by negative 4, divide this by negative 4, y equals 4. And they might ask you for x. And if they do ask you for x, that's fine, because you just take that y equals 4, plug it in for your, let me write that again, 3x plus 2y. And if y equals 4, then this is going to equal 8 plus 4, 3x equals 4, divide that by 3, divide that by 3, x equals 4/3. It's not always going to be that hard, but, you know, that's an easy way to get y, and then you just plug y in for whatever your first equation, second equation, whatever equation is easier, and then you're going to get your x. So that's an easy way to do systems of equations. Another thing you're going to need to know that's like kind of like algebra-ish is probably how to, do like, what are they called? Exponent rules. So, like if you have 4 to the power of 1/3, right? If you have 4 to the power of 1/3, if you have any number to a fraction, right? This becomes your power and this becomes your root. So if it's power over root, you're going to put your 4, and then to the power of 1 is just 4. You don't really need to write that. You can if you want. And then you need to cube root that, because that's our root. We had 1/3, and that's a 3, right? So that's how you do fractions. But if you have, let's say, for example, 4 to the power of negative 2, you just do 1/4 to the power of 2, because we cannot have a negative exponent. So we need to bring this guy down to make him positive. We need to bring him down and put a 1 over him and make him a fraction. And then that becomes 1/16, okay? And then, there's another rule you have to know how to do, and that is, so for example, if they give you, I'm trying to think of one that's maybe, if you had 3 to the power of 6, okay? If you had something like this, right? And you wanted to simplify this because none of your answers look like that, but you have this and you don't know how to simplify it, you can actually simplify the root and the power just like you would simplify a fraction. So you know how like 4/6 is just equal to 2/3? It's the same exact thing. So it's 4/6 becomes 2 and then 3. So it's the same exact thing, right? And you don't really need to write the 2, but you can write it if it helps. But yeah, that's really what you need to know for exponent rules. There's not really much to do there. And you do need to know like things about how to like add and subtract and divide like fractions, because that like is really annoying sometimes. For example, right? If you have 1/6 and you want to divide it by 3 over 6, you just need to do 1 over 6 times the reciprocal of 3 over 6, which is 6 over 3. Just flip it. So that becomes 6 over 18. And you can actually, I'm pretty sure, simplify that. And that just becomes 1 over 3. And then there's other things that you need to know how to do, and that is how to add and subtract fractions. Because, you know, if they don't have the same denominator, then how are you supposed to add them? You try to find the least common denominator, the LCD. And so if you have, let's say, 4 over 5 minus, let's say, 2 over 10, right? This one looks really easy, but it's just an easy way to like know how to do it. So if you want to do 4 over 5 minus 2 over 10, you obviously can't just subtract them. That would be wrong. You need to change this 5, make it the least common denominator, which is 10, because, you know, 5 and 10 are, common. So you make that 10, right? But what did you do to the 5 to make it 10? You multiplied it by 2. So what are you going to do? You're going to do the same to that 4. And you're going to multiply it by 2 to get 8. So now you have 8 out of 10 minus 2 out of 10, which is pretty easy. That's 6 out of 10. And that's how you subtract. It's the same thing with adding. It's the same rules. But yeah. And then we can go over, I would say, we can go over probably just, you should just know that a lot of the geometry stuff that's going to come up is going to be really annoying, but it's only like 10% of the test, but we'll go over it anyway. So you need to know how to do just angle measures they're probably going to ask you about. So for example, if they give you like an angle measure, right, and they want you to find x, and they give you like, 60, right? I know that doesn't look right, but whatever. So if they give you this and this is a straight line, then you just know that x is just 180 minus 60, and that is going to equal 120. So x is 120. It's really not that bad. But if they give you, like, say for example, they give you 60 and 60, right? You automatically know x is 120 because this and this equal each other. So 120 and 120 equal each other. And all of these together equal 360. Just remember that. And if they give you a triangle, it's the same thing. If they give you a triangle and they give you one of the angle measures of the triangle or two of the angle measures of the triangle, you automatically know what the third one is. So if they give you like 43 and like 54, it's literally just 180 minus 54 minus 43. And that's your third angle right here. But yeah. I don't think there's anything else that you need to know geometry-wise that's like that important, but you do need to know things about circles and like the equations of circles. So the equation of a circle is basically x minus h squared plus y minus 8k squared equals radius squared, right? So if they gave you x minus 4 squared plus y minus 2 squared, or let's do y plus 2 squared equals 36, we know what the center is from here. If they ask us what the center is, it's 4, negative 2, right? Because when it's x minus 4, it's positive. When it's y plus 2, it's negative, right? Just make sure you know how to do that. And if I ask you for the radius, because it might ask you for the radius from this, it's going to be 6 because r squared is 36, square root of 36 is 6, so r equals 6, right? Now, they do this really annoying thing, which I don't like, but they probably will do it, and it is when they give you x squared plus like 6x plus, one second. It'd be like x squared plus 6x plus y squared plus 6y, whatever, equals like negative 30 or something, right? And then they're like, hey, find the center, right? Which is really annoying, but it's actually, there's a way to do this. So you're going to take these like terms and these like terms, and you're going to do x squared, and then whatever half of 6 is, which is 3, you're going to square that. So plus 6x plus 9, because that's half of 6 squared. You complete the square. And then you're going to do the same with the right. And you're going to do y squared plus 6y. And then what's half of 6? 3, again, plus 9. And so this is going to be x plus 3 squared. And this is y plus 3 squared. The reason it's plus 3 is because that's what we took when we did half of 6. And don't forget, because when you do actually solve this, you're going to have to add this 9 and add this 9. Do not forget about them. You just added them to the equation. You have to add it to this side too. So when you do like negative 30, I mean, obviously this is like not a really good question because I didn't like, figure it out before. But you're going to basically add whatever numbers you added to these to the right side. So that way, if they do ask you to find the radius, you get the right number. But if they do just ask you to find the center, it's going to be, again, negative 3, because when it's plus, it's negative for circles. But yeah, like, those questions shouldn't trip you up too much. It's just kind of like, you just need to memorize kind of how it is. But yeah, so you can, what else is there to do? I mean, they might ask you about, like trig, just like sine, cosine, and tangent. But, that's, you just need to know one thing, and that's like sine x equals, 1 minute. Cosine of x, or cosine 90 minus x. So, for example, right? If I have an angle measure of like 60, and sine of 60, and sine of 60 is like, I don't know, right? So we have sine of 60, right? So we know that sine of 60 equals cosine, what's 90 minus 60? 30. So we know that. So sine 60 equals cosine 30. You just need to know that because they might ask you about that. You do need to know the unit circle, maybe. I've only seen 2 questions on like past tests that have the unit circle. But if you do want to know like an easy way to do the unit circle, just do this. You make your little, this is 1/4 of the unit circle, but whatever. So if you're pi over 2, pi over 3, there's really not much that's like a trick, but this is just an easy way to do it. And then this is just 0. And then all you have to do is 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 2, everything over 2. And then square root, except the 1s because square root of 1 is just 1. And then after you know this, I mean, most of the time, if they do ask you for anything, you can just draw this on the test. It's pretty annoying, but it'll work. You do have to know how to change things from degrees to radians or radians to degrees in case they do ask you about stuff like that. So if you have like 90 degrees, right, and you want to change it to radians, you have to do 90 times pi over 180. And if you have like 2 pi and you want to change it to degrees, then you just do 2 pi times 180 over pi. And if you kind of like forget which one to do for like, radians to degrees, degrees to radians, the way you can actually remember this is that when you go from degrees to radians, you still have that pi in your answer, right? But when you go from radians to degrees, you are actually like losing this pi because look, when you do 2 pi divided by pi, these pi's cancel out. And that answer that you get is not going to have a pi in it. So make sure that you don't have a pi in your answer and you should be good if you're going from radians to degrees. And I think that's about it for like trig stuff. And then and you need to know that like at the beginning of like the tests or like the test booklet for like math, they do give you all like the formulas for area, volume, whatever. You do not need to memorize those, but use them to your advantage, because like if they ask you about that stuff, even if they're not asking you to find the area or find the volume, they might ask you to find something else in that question, or they might not ask you, but you should in order to get what answer you need. So try to use those formulas that are at the beginning of the like math test booklet. And then yeah, just try to utilize your calculator, because like if you like a TI-84 or whatever, you can actually use this like a lot in your tests to do things that you just don't feel like doing. You can like graph. So if you want to graph something and just see how it looks, like I do this a lot, especially if I like don't know the answer and like can't solve it for myself, like just graph it and see what it looks like, and or graph all the different answers and just see which one like actually matches up. Or if you want to find like the zero of something, or like the x-intercept or the y-intercept, you can just graph it on your calculator. And so like the answer here, like I just had to like look at the graph and be like, oh, like this is wrong, like this is right, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that's basically all the tips I have for math. I don't know, I tried my best. I kept it under 30 minutes. I don't know if that's really long, but I wish you luck and good luck, and get some sleep before your test tomorrow.